Hello, this is Spartan Commander, and this is the 281st Rome Total War Brotherhood game that I've put onto YouTube. In this game, we're going to see a faction that is seldom used on Rome Total War in the 31k battles. I think we might have seen this faction used maybe twice before, but we've never seen an army in this faction before. And I think at 280 RTW battles that I've put on, I don't think we've seen this faction used with this particular army. Because I know a lot of you like to see different factions being used in our battles, and I think you'll be very pleased with the amount of factions that we have in this particular one. Okay. The team I'm in today consists of Brotherhood member Uther, who has bought an experimental Armenian army. Now, of course, whenever you experiment with anything, it is just that, an experiment, and it'll be interesting to see how well this new army of Uther's will do. Let's have a closer look. I see that he's bought Armenian Legionnaires, and let's have a look at the upgrades on those Legionnaires. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So these Legionnaires are fully upgraded. Now they throw pilers like the urban cohorts, but of course their general specifications are not as good. So that's fully upgraded Armenian Legionnaires. And then we go on to the Heavy Spearmen, the Armenian Heavy Spearmen. And once again, if we look at their upgrades, those are also fully upgraded Spearmen. Now these guys are really tough. They've just got medium size spears, but they are pretty tough infantry. And obviously they've got an anti-cavalry bonus as well. And then we move on to the archers. Well, unfortunately the Armenian archers are short range. So as you say, Uther's put 6 upgrades on them because his infantry will need a bit of shielding from enemy archers. And then we move on to the infamous Cataphract Cavalry. And let's have a look at the upgrades. Now once again, can you see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 9 upgrades on these Cataphract Cavalry, which means that these guys are fully upgraded. Now remember what we call these Cataphract Cavalry, the tanks of the ancient world, because they're armoured from head to toe, and they are extremely tough, and being fully upgraded, make no mistake, these cavalry can be battle winning troops. I see that he's also bought an archer unit. And there we go, you can see a Cataphract archer unit there. And these guys are pretty tough as well, and they can form a Canterbury circle, which we've seen in other battle videos, which makes them very difficult to kill for foot archers. So as I say, there's Uther's experimental Armenian army, and I'm looking forward to seeing how well it will do on the modern day battlefield. Our next teammate is Brotherhood member Lion Dwarf, who has bought the Rome Julio faction. I think counting his infantry units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12. He got 15 infantry units and 5 cavalry units. So that is a pretty good army to me. We'll be looking for that army for a lot of support, I think. And then our third teammate is myself, Spartan Commander, who has unusually bought the Britannia faction. We'll be looking at this army a little bit more in depth a little bit later, but just to say that this is possibly the oldest army that I've resurrected on the modern day RTW battlefield. So there's our team there, full of experience, but you wait till you see the other team. This should be a great one to watch. At this stage of the battle, I thought we'd have a look at this old Britannia army. As a lot of you will know, in the last couple of months I've been resurrecting a lot of very old armies that I've brought onto the modern day battlefield, and I think this one is possibly the oldest army that I've brought onto the modern day battlefield. I think this is over 10 years old. Let's have a close look. Can you see that I've got chosen swordsmen? Now these are the elite infantry of the barbarian faction, and as you can see, they're fully upgraded. So that's 3 experience stripes, gold shield, gold attack for these chosen swordsmen. And they are quite tough for barbarian troops. They are very tough infantry. And as you can see there, I think I've got, I think it's about 9 of those units I've got. And they are very, very tough, and especially fully upgraded, they should be really good. Let's say you got 9 units of those. Now you see most modern players that bring Britannia just bring, say, maybe 12 head hurlers and 6 fully upgraded chariots. Well, you can see this is a really balanced army, and as you can see here, we move on to the head hurlers now. Now remember, these heads are effective against armor, and they bring a fear factor as well to enemy troops. The real head hurlers, back in the day, like, they used to dip their heads, heads in lime, and throw them at the enemy, and if the heads just touched the skin of the enemy, it would cause terrible burns. If you notice, I've only got 5 units of head hurlers. And then move on to the chariots. Now if you notice, I haven't got the elite barbarian warlord chariots, I've just got heavy chariots in this particular army. And if you notice there, they've got these scythed wheels and just a soldier. There's a soldier actually in charge of the chariot and one that does fighting with his sword out, if you notice there. So that's my old balanced army. As I say, this army is over 10 years old and it's a very balanced Britannia army for the modern day battlefield, and it should be interesting to see how well this really old army does. And here is the other team. We have RTW player Tut, who has bought the Pontus faction. Now this is Tut's faction of choice for the 31k battlefield at the moment, and that is Pontus, and he plays with this faction extremely well. In fact, I would say he's probably one of the best players to use Pontus that I've seen on RTW. If you notice here, he's got his bronze shield spearman there with as you can see, 7 upgrades. That's an experience stripe, gold shield, gold attack. And you've noticed his Pontus spearmen, pikemen have got long pikes there. So once again, like we said before, you have to fight down those pikes to kill the man on the other end. Also, he's got a chariot archer unit here. As you can see, there's 2 archers and the driver of the chariot in those chariots. They are quite a nuisance when you use them properly. They can cause a lot of casualties. And then he's got his heavy chariots here. His heavy scythed chariots, and as you can see, they've got spikes not only on the wheels but on the horses as well. Very powerful units there, and of course all chariots bring a fear factor, but these charioteers can run amok, and remember, if they run amok like we've seen in other battle videos, they kill friend and foe alike and can be a menace to anything on the battlefield. So that's Tut's Pontus army there. If you notice, he split his army basically into maybe 2 or maybe even 3 lots there. He's got his main pike army there, but he's got pikes and his chariots and chariot archers out to the left there. So that's a pretty good pike army to me. Now here's the army I was talking about earlier. Have you ever seen a balanced 31k Armenia army on the 31k battlefield? Out of 280 battle videos, I've never shown an army like this before. So I thought it was different and something that you might find interesting to see. As it's just a completely well-balanced army. And it was bought by OTS Senator. I can't pronounce that first name, but it's OTS Senator there, who has bought this balanced 31k Scythian army. As you can see here, these axemen here, the Scythian best infantry is fully upgraded, 9 upgrades on. There's a close look at their axemen, just in case you haven't seen them before. As I say, this is a really well balanced Scythian army, which, as I say, out of 280 battle videos I've shown, we've never seen a balanced Scythian army like this. You can see he's got the chosen archers there, long range archers, because all his units will need shielding from enemy archers, and these chosen archers are really good. At long range and can do a lot of damage. They're so good you can even use them as light infantry when they run out of archers. And then we've got the headhunting maidens with those effective against armor axes. Now I think cavalry against cavalry, these are probably the best cavalry in the game. Those effective against armor axes really make a difference when they're up against heavily armored troops. So there's a well balanced Scythian army there, and it'll be interesting to see how well it does on the modern day battlefield. As I say, can any of you remember seeing a 31k balanced Scythian army like that on a 31k battlefield? Very unusual. And their third teammate is a Brotherhood member Cal, who has bought the Rome Brutio faction. So as you can see, this is only a 3v3 battle, but there are 5 different factions in this battle, and it should be an interesting one for you to watch, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, at this very, very early stage of the battle here, you can see Tut has brought that nuisance chariot archer over to our left flank here, probably with a view to try and kill as many of my moving troops as he can with that unit. If you notice that Lion Dwarf is sending over some heavy cavalry to chase that unit off. Remember, those heavy cavalry will not be able to catch that chariot unit because it's too fast, but that's a nice bit of teamwork by Lion there to bring his cavalry over to cover my troops as they're moving over from those chariot archers. Okay, if you notice here, Lion, I'm just going to pause the game for a second. Lion with his Roman army is going to be our cutting edge. If you notice that both myself and Uther will stay behind Lion Dwarf, as I say, because he will be the hard edge, the cutting edge of our attack there with his elite Roman troops. Our 2 armies would kind of be like supporting armies for his attack. I think that's the way we were looking at this. But make no mistake, Lion's got a lot to do there. There's lots of good armies in front of him. As I say, should be a great one to watch. Okay, at this stage you can see Lion advancing towards the enemy line here. We're not going to hang around, we're not going to give them the initiative here, we're going to attack. Let's just pause the game for a second. As you can see here, can you see that Pontus and their Brutii, a Roman army there, have both moved over to support their Scythian ally. Now they probably think that their Scythian ally's army is possibly a weak faction for the 31k battlefield. So can you see how they've moved over to support their ally? Nice bit of teamwork there by Cal and Tut. Just to support their main centre. I think they feel they're stronger as a group. As you can see, the chariot archer's still out there, still shooting arrows. He's probably shooting into the flank and rear of our troops as we're moving across to the battlefield. But also I'd like to draw your attention to Tut's 5 chariot units, heavy chariot units here. He's moved out to our left. It looks like he's going to challenge my Britannia charioteers here. So that could be an interesting tussle here when or if the chariots kind of meet in this part of the battlefield. Let's just continue the game and see what happens. I can see those Pontus charioteers moving towards my army there. I just wonder how many of you have actually seen chariots fight chariots on battles before. As I say, it's quite unusual on the 31k battlefield to see chariots fighting chariots. So this is once again something maybe a little bit different that might happen here, that we've shown in other battle videos. Let's say this Britannia army of mine is, I think, by far the oldest army I've brought onto the modern 31k battlefield. Okay, let's just pause the game for a second. As you can see here, I'm taking my my Britannia heavy chariots towards the Pontus chariots there. You see my infantry and head herders moving forward to support Lion Dwarf, and you can see Uther's Armenian army is also supporting Lion Dwarf. But if you notice, the army has kind of massed here to try and support their Scythian ally. And if you see that Pontus is bringing over some pikemen that he'd put over on that left flank. Remember when we saw at the beginning he'd split his army? He's bringing those pikes over from that left flank of ours there. So as I say, our Lion Dwarf Julii ally has got a lot to do there. Big force there to try and break down with our support. Okay, can you see I'm taking the challenge on here. I'm moving my Britannia chariots forward here in a hope on taking these Pontus chariots head on, because I think that'd be an interesting little thing to see. But if you notice, the Pontus chariots don't really seem to want to take on my Brit chariots and are moving over. They probably see a different target that they'd like to hit with those chariots. You can see they're moving towards my Armenian ally there, moving towards his cavalry. And if you notice, that Uther's moved his fully upgraded cavalry into attack those chariots. If you notice, I'm bringing my Britannia chariots down as well to support Uther. But chariots versus cavalry, usually the cavalry gets a bit chopped up there when they're up against good chariots. Let's pause the game for a second here. Right, as you can see here, I'm bringing my Britannia chariots in to help support Uther. But if you notice, Uther's cavalry has already been reduced. Remember, those cavalry units are 54 and they've already been reduced. I saw one down there to 20. Where those Pontus chariots are really chopping his cavalry up. Can you see the dead cavalry on the ground there? As those chariots are kind of mowing them down with those scythes on the horses and on the wheels there. So even though those cavalry are fully upgraded, you see if you take on chariots, it can be. It's funny. Sometimes the cavalry wins, but sometimes the cavalry gets chopped up. If you notice, as I say, I've got my Britannia charioteers there, moving in to support Uther against these Pontus charioteers. There was some close-up fighting there. As I say, moving my chariots down to help. It would have been great if the Pontus chariots had taken mine on head-on further on up, because that would have been interesting to see who would have won that. But I think the Pontus general was thinking more tactically than that, possibly. So as you can see, a lot of Armenian units have been routed by those Pontus units now. And of course, seeing my allies rout will lower the morale of my own chariots here. If you notice, there's some more Pontus chariots coming across to attack my Britannia chariots. Here's a close-up of the chariots moving there. As you can see now the Britannia chariots and Pontus chariots are actually fighting each other. I was just going to say, in other battle videos that I've put on, I don't think we've seen chariots fighting chariots before. So that's quite an interesting Britannia chariots against those Pontus chariots there. So let's pause the game for a second. As you can see there now, between us, between the Uther and myself, we've managed to take out all of the Pontus heavy chariots. But if you look on the battlefield, just new players watching this, can you see if you put your cavalry, even fully upgraded cavalry, against chariots, what can happen, the casualties that they can cause there. So that cost Uther a lot of cavalry there, but I think taking out those heavy Pontus chariots is well worth it there. Not just to stop the killing that they can do, but the fear factor they bring. Okay, can you see that Lion Dwarf here is doing a right flanking action on the enemy troops? If you notice, I brought my head hurlers up. Notice they're in open order to try and avoid archer casualties from the enemy. But I don't want to shoot my head hurlers onto this Testudo unit there with that defense. The heads wouldn't cause that many casualties there with that Testudo unit. What I want to do is try and concentrate on the bulk of the enemy army. Don't forget, those heads bring a fear factor as well as effective against armour. As you can see over on our left flank here, Pontus is bringing some of his pikemen there over to threaten Uther's Armenian infantry. So there's a lot going on the battlefield. If you notice, I've got my elite chosen swordsmen there ready to throw in. I'm keeping them back at the moment because I'm trying to avoid archer damage. Remember, barbarian troops are very susceptible to archer damage, so I'm keeping those 9 fully upgraded units back to bring into the fray once Lion Dwarf is engaged with the enemy. Like we said earlier, remember, Lion Dwarf is our cutting edge teammate here with his elite Roman troops. He's the one that we'll be supporting and relying on to make inroads into the enemy, and as I say, then we can support him from there. Nice aggressive right flanking action there by Lion Dwarf. Remember what we said about flanking actions before, not just to turn the enemy in front of you, but maybe even to try and disrupt the whole enemy battle line if you can. So that's a nice little move there by Lion Dwarf. As you can see, the head hurlers, can you see them throwing their heads into the enemy ranks there? I don't really like using the heads on open order units because that, of course, they're in open order to avoid casualties there from missile fights. So what I'm going to do is move my head hurlers probably a bit more over and aim at the more dense infantry there, try and get some more casualties. But as I say, Lion Dwarf here is on the right flank facing Cal. And if you notice now that Cal is moving out to our right flank in a counter flanking attack. There, can you see he's moving out here? He's looking to move around the flank of Lion Dwarf, and Lion Dwarf tactically withdrew a little bit there to face the Brutii threat, rather than let him flank him there. So that was quite a good tactical move there by both of them. I notice that Pontus is bringing out some of his pikemen there. See, they'll be very conscious of my chariots. They know that those chariots bring a fear factor, which lowers the morale of their troops. So that's why they've brought the pikes over there, because they know that pikes will counter the chariots. As you can see here, Lion Dwarf moving his Julite army forward again. He's wanting to be aggressive. He knows that we just don't want to stand around here. He knows that he's like the cutting edge of our team, as I said earlier. And if you notice that Cal is moving right over to our right flank now. It's like he's trying to draw Lion Dwarf away from the main battle here. And if you notice, I've moved my chariots out to the right flank. Just pause the game for a second. Just want to show you this chariot that's run amok here. And remember what we've talked about before, this Pontus chariot's run amok. Now if this chariot runs into its own troops, its allies' troops, or enemy troops, it will be an absolute menace. Once it's run amok, it just doesn't care what it kills. Whatever it comes up against, even its own Pontus infantry, it will kill. So that's one of the drawbacks of bringing chariots in some factions, is when they run amok, they can be a menace to both a friend and foe alike. Right, if you notice here, we've got my head herders moving over to the right, because where I really would like to target is the this enemy Brutii army here, because that's their kind of their cutting force army there. I think Pontus is very good. As I say, the Scythian army is unusual to the 31k battlefield, but I think Cal's Roman army may be the main danger here. So if I can get my head hurlers over there and start throwing the heads in there, can you see the heads being thrown in there? Just pause the game for a second. You can see the heads in the air there, the black dots. There's one there. As I say, they're effective against armor, and they do bring a fear factor. I say I've only got 5 head hurlers, which is very, very low for the modern day battlefield, but as I said, this is a balanced army from over 10 years ago, Britannia army from over 10 years ago, so it'll be interesting to see how well it does. It wouldn't surprise me if this forward unit here routed. It's been hit by several volleys of head hurlers there. There you go, and he's decided to rout. He suffered so many casualties there, and with the enemy troops in front of it, decided to rout there. Okay, let's just pause the game for a second. As you can see, I've got my head hurlers up there throwing their heads against those enemy troops. We've got Pontus in the centre pushing in, but over on our left flank here, can you see that Uther's Armenia army is facing the Scythian axemen and the Pontus pikemen. As you can see, the Scythian axemen attacking. But if you notice here, can you see they've got a couple of Uther's units in a hammer and anvil attack. Can you see that the Pontus pikemen are the anvil, and the Scythian axemen are the hammer? So that's a classic hammer and anvil attack there on one of Uther's units. So it'll be interesting to see how well Armenia does against Scythia and those Pontus pikemen. There's a general overview. You can see Uther's got his archers there, shooting archers into the enemy troops. But as I say, there's a few Scythian axemen units there have been sent out by the Scythian general to attack Uther's Armenian army there. Right, if you notice, I'm moving my Britannia troops, chosen swordsmen, over to the centre. Here's this hammer and anvil attack we were talking about earlier. It wouldn't surprise me if that Armenian unit in the middle, there you go, has just routed there under that hammer and anvil attack. So there's a general overview of the battle as it stands at the moment. You see Cal's just charged his cavalry in, and Lion Dwarf counterattacked with his cavalry. You can see I've got my head hurlers quite close to the enemy troops there, and they'll be throwing in loads of those effective against armour, fear bringing heads to the enemy Brutii army there. I think maybe whoever wins on this right flank, it could be pivotal. Right, can you see the amount of heads? Can you see that's only 5 units of head hurlers, but can you see the amount of heads, those effective against armour heads going into those Brutii infantry there? If you notice, I've no longer got my head hurlers in open formation. I've just got them in close formation there, because I think they do more impact. Right, let's just pause the game here. As you can see, I've got my head hurlers in close formation there throwing the heads, and I've got my chariots out to the right flank here. As you can see, I'm looking to do a right flanking attack there with those chariots. Basically all the units over on this right flank are now engaged. If you notice, I'm moving my Britannia chosen swordsmen, those fully upgraded swordsmen there. They've got battle cry on them. I've pressed the battle cry, which makes their attack even better. Over here on our left flank, you can see that I've got a couple of my chosen swordsmen with Uther's Armenian army there, helping out with the Pontus pikemen and those Scythian axemen there. The left flank here against those Pontus pikemen and as I said, those Scythian axemen could well be up in the air. There's a lot of enemy troops there that have not been used yet, fresh enemy troops, so that left flank of ours could be possibly a target for the enemy. You can see a lot of the chosen archers still shooting arrows into our allies' army there. And those headhunting maidens at the back, remember those effective against armour headhunting maidens, still waiting to be used. But here on the right flank, you can see we're being very aggressive. Lion Dwarf, like you said, is being the leading cutting edge here in the battle. I say my head hurlers are throwing those effective against armour, fear giving heads against Brutii. And I'm just thinking, if I charge my chariots in right now, remember the chariots have got a fear factor as well as big attack specifications they move in. Let's just pause the game for a second. So as you can see here, Cal's Green Brutii army is not only being attacked by our allies' Julia army, is being pelted by effective against armour heads. So their morale are going to be lowered. The chariots, my chariots will lower their morale on top of that. So I think they're ripe for routing. If you notice, I brought my elite chosen swordsman in there now attacking as well. Let's move across the battlefield, and over on the left flank here you can see a lot of those Scythian axemen are now being brought into the fray against our Armenian ally and a couple of my Britannia units that I've put over there. Okay, but as I say here, it looks like the green Brutii is almost ready, ripe for routing here as I charge my chariots. And right, the green general is now routed. Can you see the Brutii general is routed? Which of course will lower their morale even more. So you see, by using this combination of Britannia and Rome, how you can really lower the morale of the enemy troops. Right, let's just pause the game for a second. But just have a look at some of these units that are routed. 45 men in that unit, 39, 38, 60, 35. Can you see that they've routed in these big numbers, basically because their morale has been brought down by the head hurlers and the chariots, and then with both Lion Dwarf and my troops, my British troops attacking as well, has really lowered the morale and was made that Brutii army ripe for routing. And as you can see, there's a great combination of Britannia and Roman attack there, and what they can do when they go in together. So now on this right flank of ours, as I say, this could prove pivotal to the battle. We've routed the enemy Brutii troops there. As I say, new players watching this, can you see what a great combination of Rome and Britannia can do? You don't often see it on the 31k battlefield, but I thought that was a good example on how well they can work together. So as I say, this could prove pivotal on this right flank. And what I would do is send my chariots off after those Brutii infantry to stop them from rallying as well. So if you notice, the headhunting maidens have now been brought into play here. Now the headhunting maidens here, can you see they're being put in against infantry? Well, personally, I don't like to use the headhunting maidens against infantry. As I say, I think personally, cavalry versus cavalry, they're the best in the game, but against infantry, they're not so good. Right, just pause the game for a second. You can see I got a couple of my Britannia units there, in with Lion Dwarfs, Julii units, and Uther's Armenian units there, up against the attack by the headhunting maidens. You can see they're effective against armour axes there, doing some good work against our troops. But as I say, I'm always a bit hesitant to put them in up against infantry, especially elite infantry like Rome. But they seem to be doing quite good there. As I say, meanwhile over on our right flank you can see that the Pontus general now is putting a wall of pikes up. He's seen what's happened there and is trying to shore up his flank there against our attack. Okay, so obviously, like we've talked about in other battle videos, we don't really want to take those pikes head on, we'd like to flank them. If you can see here, Liondorf is bringing his cavalry over to support his infantry here against the Scythian cavalry attack. And there's a general overview. Right, that's bad news for me. You can see my general's just been killed, and as we know, barbarian troops' morale will drop a lot when their general's been killed. So that was a bad move of mine, letting my general be exposed to those pikes. But as I say, these chosen swordsmen are fully upgraded, and those of you that have used Britannia before know that these troops are pretty tough for barbarians. As you can see the heads that are being thrown in? I'm aiming the heads at the Pontus general there, reducing its numbers there, making it prime for attack. Now if I bring in a Britannia unit in behind that, there you go. Can you see I'm attacking with the Britannia unit into behind the back of that depleted Pontus general, and is routed now. That was aiming all those head hurlers at that general. They're causing massive casualties, and then hitting it with a unit from behind caused the rout. Okay, let's just pause the game for a second. So you can see now the Pontus general has been routed, and that will seriously lower the morale of the rest of his troops on this part of the battlefield. You can see that the combination of Scythian axemen and headhunting maidens have routed those units of ours that were surrounded. So over on our left flank, the enemy has done well. They've routed our units there, and now they'll be moving from left to right. But can you see this Pontus chariot unit here in amongst its allies? But remember, it's run amok now, so it'll be killing its own troops, even its own Pontus troops it will be killing. There, if you notice there, can you see he's killing his own troops, just chopping down those maidens as well. It's allies' maidens. So that's what happens when they run amok there.
You have killed the enemy general. Now his men.
Right, if you notice here, we've just killed the Scythian general there. So obviously, like barbarian troops, we said before, their morale will drop like a stone, and they will be ripe for actually routing there. As you can see, all the Scythian axemen are now engaged, and the headhunting maidens. as well as what's left of the Pontus army is still engaged there. Just going to pause the game for a second here. I just want to show you that run amok chariot again. Can you see how he's chopping through his own Pontus troops there? Like I say, you know, like there you go. Let's see, chopping down his own Pontus pikemen there. So the new players watching this, you know, if you think about bringing chariots, I know they're powerful, but try and have a think about whether you think that they're worth bringing when you see something like that. Right, can you see I'm charging in my Britannia chariots now into the rear and flank of those enemy troops, with a view to hopefully lower their morale even more. So when our infantry attack, those Pontus units will hopefully rout even easier there. You can see most of the enemy troops are now routing, and I believe some of them are actually have admitted defeat there. Right, just like to draw your attention here to this part of the battlefield. Do you remember there was a line of Pontus pikemen there? And I sent some of my Britannia troops to fight it. Can you see the line of dead? That's what we talk about, you know, you don't really want to take pikemen on head on. Because see the dead of Britannia and Lion Dwarf's Red Julii troops there, that's what we got for taking that pike unit on head on. So that's why we often talk about not taking them head on and trying to outflank them. Right, you can see various parts of the battlefield here where the dead are. But do you remember that Cal's army was routed? So there's not a big pile of Brutii dead because they were just routed from the battlefield. They weren't actually killed. And there we go. It looks like our team has managed to to go on and win the battle.
You and your warriors have won.
I hope you found that interesting with all those different factions in. I just thought it was such a great battle to show you. It was a great battle anyway, but with all the different factions in, I thought it was great. Okay, the first thing I'd like to say is well done to everybody in the game. Well played, guys, everybody in the game there. Well played, Cal. Well played, the OTS Senator, and well played, Tut. If you notice that Cal's got very low kills, but that was because we saw that combination of Britannia and Roman attack there on that flank. He didn't get really a chance to use his troops properly there before they were all routed, and that's why he's got a small amount of kills there. And you can see Tut's got extremely good kills there, 1,466 for Pontus. Really well done to him. So really well done, you three. It's nice to see all those different factions. Really well done to Lion Dwarf. I noticed he got the highest kills in the game with his cutting edge army as he took them forward with us supporting. I thought Uther's experimental army did quite well. It was just a shame that he lost those fully upgraded cavalry towards the beginning of the battle, because I think that they could have actually gone on to be battle winning troops. But I wanted to show you that because very often when you fight cavalry against chariots, you can see what happened. Right, just have a look at my battle statistics there. I don't think my old army did particularly good there, really. If you look at the statistics that they did, the head herders did okay. Remember, they cause casualties, but they do bring a fear factor as well. And the swordsmen, well, they did okay, not brilliant. So, but in general, I thought that old army did okay. Spartan Commander saying goodbye for now.